I have lived long enough to know that opportunities must be seized or they will be lost.
Welcome back to Wall Street Radio. I'm your host, Tanner Yarton, here with Dan Young. It's the 11th of February, 2025. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Anduril and the company that owns it publicly, Dom H, as well as Trump's joining the Dom H board and Eric and Don Jr. We're also going to be talking about 13Fs, groceries, and the SMCI and semiconductor ecosystem and potential turnaround in SMCI. Enjoy. So yeah, let's jump right in. First things first, talking about Anduril. I don't think we've talked about him on the pod, but Palmer Luckey is one of my favorite CEOs, up and coming guys. He's the founder of Oculus, created the virtual reality headset company back in, I want to say 2016 or 2017, sold to Meta shortly thereafter for something to the tune of a few $1 billion. I want to say $3 billion. Now he is trying to be the next aerospace and defense contractor or missile and defense contractor for the United States government. He believes that there's a fundamental problem in contracting for the government right now, where these companies, Lockheed, Northrop, L3, they're creating problems and then just getting a blank check from the government to create the solution for it. And he believes that that's the wrong way to go about it. And so do I. And that's why I'm such a fan of his. We can't be spending money in that way and expect an efficient operation. That's how you get things like the $100,000 bag of ball bearings from that congressional hearing. I'm not sure if you saw that, Dan, but pretty funny moment.
Yeah, I did.
It just kind of highlights exactly what he's trying to fix, which is you can't operate a government efficiently if you've got companies that are just able to get blank checks and spend as much as they want. It's not an efficient way to go about things. And when you think about the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now and how scrappy they've been and how effective some of their systems have been, it makes you wonder, like, is this spend even worth it? And I think Anduril asked that question as well and is creating products that are much cheaper to make. And they're also made to order. So they make them and then they sell them. And that's a different model than what we're seeing out of Lockheed and Moog and some of these other contractors. And I think that mix-up is good, especially for the American taxpayer. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that leads to the Pentagon failing their audit. What was it, like 5 years in a row or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the money going to different shell corporations in the various places. Anything backed by Peter Thiel is going to probably do really well. Peter Luckey has such a strong connection with Joe Lonsdale and Peter Thiel, and anything right now that they all touch turns into hot fire, and it's a huge thing. But also it's the same type of approach that Palantir had with government and efficiency, which is let's revolutionize this. It's been a headache in the market and a problem in the industry. It's a large thing to tackle, but let's bring that Silicon Valley energy to this industry and really like ramp things up. What's cool about Luckey is he's doing the same thing with defense, and some of the weapons that they're creating are insanely cool. So it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to when it comes to market, because I do like that system. Instead of going for federal contracts and then creating it once you have the money, being able to say, I have the money, now just buy it, like, a typical supply demand type of situation. That seems like a really attractive business model. So I can't wait to actually see that come to market and see that company continue to develop, because as a whole, as well, like American defense, it's a great thing for us to have, which I feel like we've put on the back burner a little bit.
I agree. And if anybody is listening that hasn't heard of Anduril, hasn't seen any of their stuff, definitely check out their YouTube channel. When they come out with a new product, it's like they're announcing the Scrub Daddy. Like, they'll come in with some really cool video. It's weird. It's like a McDonald's commercial for weapons systems. Most recently, they came out with their Barracuda system, which is a missile system. And the whole advertisement has some cool, like, cyberpunk music, and it's animated, and I don't know. It's just wild to see, because you don't usually get that out of a company that makes weapons of war. It almost feels a little strange being like, wow, this is so hype. And it's like, no, that's blowing somebody up.
Yeah. It's much,
but it's fun.
Much different than the Lockheeds and Northrops for sure.
Yeah. That said, I have seen some pretty cool stealth commercials come out of some of the big contractors. Like I remember seeing one, it was like the ball gets thrown over a fence into like a neighbor's yard and there's like a big dog there. And this 10-year-old girl like goes invisible and like goes through the thing. And then it ended up being like a B2 commercial. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
that was a pretty good one. But yeah, his stuff's great. He's super eccentric, which has kind of been the name of the game lately. Guys like Elon Musk kind of pioneered that, at least in my lifetime, like seeing these more eccentric CEOs come out of the woodwork back in 2018. I mean, really 2017 to 2019 is when he kind of popped up. And now we're seeing more of these eccentric CEOs come out. Guys like Karp and Lonsdale, who have been around a while, but for me, like they're only getting popular recently.
Yeah.
Those are super eccentric dudes.
Yeah. I mean, the forefather is really probably Steve Jobs and like his vision and how eccentric he was with Apple and like the way in which he went about the business, but his non-directional behavior and like creative outlook on the market and really trying things that people were scared to do. And that sparked a lot of tech revolution across the board. You know, he represents, I believe, like the beginning of a way different way for technology. And that's why he's one of the greatest of all time, obviously. But in terms of Anduril, one thing we talked about this morning, getting investment in Anduril or being a part of this ride, which, you know, what's the problem with a lot of companies that look really great pre-IPO is that it's really tough sometimes to get shares and be a part of that pre-IPO time period. But then also like once it goes to market, you could have like a snowflake type of situation where the price goes from 100 pre-IPO to 500 7 days out of the IPO. And you're just like, like now's not a time to get in. Now I have to wait like 6 months to a year for this fluff to come out. Dom H is one that was seeing a lot of gains yesterday, and you brought it to me. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yesterday, just kind of bumping around in some different Discord groups, saw somebody mention Dom H. I believe it was at Judah, who does have a Twitter. And I started to look into it and I noticed that it was very similar to DXYZ, which is Destiny Tech 100, which is a firm that owns a number of disruptive private companies, and then you buy their stock and, you know, you get access to those companies via their stock. Well, these vehicles operate at a certain premium to NAV usually. Now, if they're operating at a discount, then you're given some good arbitrage there. But Dom H is very similar to DXYZ in that sense, where they own a lot of kind of speculative, disruptive companies. They own Epic Games, they own XAI, they owned SpaceX, and now they own Anduril as well. And I think it can make a very similar move to what DXYZ did, because people are going to want access to Anduril. You and I have been talking about Anduril for a number of years now, and I've certainly been talking about it with my friends for a number of years. Because it's not public and because he's not super mainstream, there hasn't been much discussion about it. And now that we've got this new administration where most of the people who are kind of high up, like we just talked about, those innovators, Karp, Lonsdale, Andreessen, all of these guys are super involved in Anduril. So I think that's going to hit the headlines a lot more. People are going to want access to it and they're going to find any way they can. And for me, that's been this Dom H, which is the only company that I've found that's publicly traded that has access to Anduril. Now, the caveat to that is that their position is very small. So the market cap is somewhere in the ballpark of 35 million, assets under management somewhere in the ballpark of 45 million, and their Anduril holding is 400,000 to 500,000 at a $14 billion valuation. So even if we assume that Anduril is worth 50 billion, which many people assume it is, you know, that's still only 1.5 million on a $45 million book, which isn't all that great. If we look back at DXYZ, the reason why people wanted it is because they owned a lot of SpaceX. 35% of their holdings were in SpaceX. So, you know, that one made a little bit more sense. And I think that's why we saw it operating at a 500%, even all the way up to a 900% premium to NAV at one point in time. But you and I both know that when people want access to something, even if it's a small percentage, they kind of disregard the numbers of it and will just buy it anyway. And I hesitate to say something like that, but it's just been proven true so many times. Even though their position is small, it'll still be an opportune way to get access to Anduril.
Yeah, retail will flock for sure, and that will bring in some institutional interest, but they'll be trading it very haphazardly. You know, it'll be in portfolio one day, out the next, and I think it'll just be one of those things that sees a nice spike and then drops. And I mean, the news this morning coming out of Dom H, which is, it sounds like, is it Eric Trump? And then one of the other Trumps joined the board.
Yeah, so it looks like they're bringing Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump to the board, and they also joined the private placement. I don't know if that is like that just came out within the last 10 minutes. Halted. So the halt resumes in a minute. We'll see what happens. But yeah, they appoint Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump to the board, and a $13.5 million offering, $4 million dividend to stockholders, and $3.47 per share purchase price.
Whoa.
I mean, right now it looks like it's just being unhalted, and wow, it's up to $8. So evidently that was bullish.
Yeah, it just unlocked. It's gonna fly. Wow, it's gonna really fly. I think
Tremendous.
It depends on the what was the special dividend? Did they say the actual dollar amount?
So I don't think they noted the actual dividend amount, which is confusing because why would they do an offering and a $4 million dividend? Okay, well, if it's $4 million on 6.5 million shares, that's not a huge dividend.
It's an offset of like sentiment.
It's an offset to the offering, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. This could
very interesting.
Yeah,
this thing could fly.
Yeah, it could definitely fly.
Yeah, this is one that, again, I found it yesterday, thought it was interesting, and when you think about the stocks that go ballistic, more recently after Destiny and some of these quantum runners, people are interested in a couple of things more recently. The proximity to Trump being one of them. We saw it with RCAT as well. And that's actually also something that Dom H owns. Anything that's in close proximity to the president has been flying recently, and I think will continue to fly. And that's something that you and I have been adamant about going back to even before he was elected.
Yeah.
Which is when a new president comes in, you get sectors and themes that are related to them, family members or just people that they've been working with for a while. They're sitting on boards of certain companies, and those are the ones that really outperform. We saw it with Joe Biden as well when he took office. Anything that was clean energy, he has tons of pals in all these boards and all these kind of advisory groups that are just feeding him companies to give stimulus to. And in 2020, it worked really well. And those companies saw 1,000% moves in 1 month, 2 months, even some of them faster. So I'm a big fan of the election cycle because it brings this kind of opportunity. In 2020, I was not as into it as I am now, meaning I didn't quite pick up on it. A lot of it was hindsight, but now, I've seen a cycle go by. I know what stimulus looks like, and I know what proximity to power can do to a company. And now we're seeing that play out in real time with this, things like Dom H and whatnot.
Yeah, what'll be interesting today with this one is because it was up almost 100% yesterday, it was up 91% yesterday. A lot of traders and retail would have flocked there just because it's up so much, let alone not really knowing if there's an Anduril tie-in or what exactly the company does. Now with the Trump related news giving it tailwind into higher gains, like if it does now become a thing that, they have access to Anduril, they have access to Databricks, like very notable companies in their portfolio now backed with the Trumps on the board. And it's entering this meme type of phase where it's up 130% in a day in a pre-market session,
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see what type of momentum it sees today because volume so far right now, as we're watching it live, it's 9:03 on the East Coast. So we're at 27 minutes still open. The volume in here is pumping. So that'll be really interesting to see. Another name that I wanted to talk to you about because it's just on our mind as a recent runner and dip from lows is SMCI and really like the semi group because AMD reported a week ago pretty poor reaction from the market, not the best type of earnings report. They've been in a downtrend for quite some time, but then you have something like SMCI, which is kicking out of a downtrend. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, before we even jump into it, AMD, I think AMD has a problem. Lisa Su is great for the company. I think that's number one. But I think they have a problem. They could come out with a decent report and she'll get on that earnings call and just sandbag. And that's something they're notorious for, they being some of these big semi leaders like Jensen Huang, Charles Liang, and Lisa Su. They are so notorious. After watching a ton of their interviews back in early 2024 when I was building my thesis for SMCI, in late 2023, I noticed that they constantly, even if they're doing great, they'll get on and they'll answer questions like they're doing terrible. And I don't think that's great for the share price. But as far as SMCI is concerned, an interesting one. I've done a ton of research on this over the last year. They sandbagged their earnings going into 2024, announced a re-raise and a guide beat before earnings in the spring of 2024, led to a huge run. And now they're just kind of tapering off into oblivion, which is surprising to me because they're still such a crucial part of the infrastructure. There's obviously questions about competition and, other players like Dell and HP entering the space. I mean, they've already been in it, but, taking more market share from SMCI. But Charles Liang has a phenomenal relationship with Jensen and Lisa. So to see it kind of tapering off into oblivion with questions of solvency and potential fraud occurring in the firm is surprising, I guess. I mean, obviously those headlines are really bad for any firm, but I don't see them being taken out of the infrastructure anytime soon. I see videos of new warehouses coming online all across the country, all across the world. And if there's any internal photos of those warehouses, I'm still seeing a ton of super micro racking. The way you can tell the difference is if you just go on the website of Dell, HP, they all have little signatures on their racks. So you can kind of tell the difference. And same thing with like cooling systems, like VRT cooling systems have a pretty unique look. So if you're looking at a picture, a news headline that's like new 1,000,000 square foot data center put up in, Columbus, Ohio or whatever, you look at the photos of the racking in their system and you can see the companies that are in there before it's maybe announced, or if those are not disclosed in that company's announcements or reporting, which to me is a fun little way to kind of get ahead of the curve.
So do you think it's up, 90% in the past 4 trading days? It hit a bottom. Obviously, it was down at $25. Are you taking investment here? Are you taking a position?
So this is similar to me, kind of like Carvana was coming out of its bankruptcy. Obviously, SMCI is not bankrupt, but it has a very similar feel and a very similar look on the chart, kind of a bit of an analog, if you will. So in Carvana, what I waited for was a couple of months for it to kind of get that initial pop, that wedge pop out of the extension low, and then some kind of a stage 1 base or some kind of a base to signify that buyers are consistent. It's not just like a one-off dip buy. And then that's when I'd like to take position. So if you look back at something like Crowd, probably gives the best example of it. Obviously, we don't have a screen share here, but if you go back and you look at Crowd coming out of the 2022 lows, you recognize kind of what it did there. So puts in an extension low down around, $90, makes a very swift pop up, which everybody was like, holy shit, it's running. It's gone 50% in a few days. And then it takes 3-4 months to undercut moving averages once more and then set up a nice little base around $140. So the ultimate low being 91, the base kind of being 150. That's where I'm looking to get interested. Pinning bottoms has never been something I've been tremendous at unless you're coming into like a ridiculously long-term support. So for me, SMCI, it's still on my radar. It has been since 2022, actually. And I'd like to get involved again, certainly, but it needs to technically line up with what I want it to do. Fundamentally, sure, but technically not yet.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of curiosity about the way in which the political environment continues to develop and Trump's relationships with some of these countries like Taiwan and China and like the potential conflict there, but then also semis in the future and the regulation that's going to be in the next couple of months. That's going to be an interesting topic to follow specifically with Trump. And as I look to where companies are positioning themselves and investors and funds are looking to diversify their portfolio, one thing I noticed last night was David Tepper released his 13F with Appaloosa, and China continues to not only control a lot of his portfolio. I think BABA is now at 15%. So I'm curious now what firms and funds are going to be investing in outside of semis, because that had a lot of hype the last 3 years. The multiples became egregious and saturated. Now they're definitely down to a more optimal position, and stocks like Nvidia are proving that they can meet the stock price and the demand that they're incurring with investors. But do people start buying this dip on AMD? Do they feel like this quarter, the first quarter specifically with Trump's election, are they going to invest in energy? Are they going to place into commodities? Like, where are they putting their focus? Because there's been a lot of talk lately, and there's always talk about it, but a recession or a decline in the market, a pullback, it's been a nonstop thesis for the past at least 6 to 8 months because of the dramatic gains we've made in the market and because of the S&P performance in 2024. How are portfolio managers presenting their fund and making sure that they're mitigating risk and like doing their fiduciary responsibility for their investors by, classifying which stocks are going to enter? And that to me is very, very interesting. Like, where's the safe haven? Where are people putting their gut? Are they buying bottoms? Are they continuing with consistent trends? Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we saw in 2023, any firm that didn't have NVIDIA was getting absolutely clowned. But going into 2023, how do you tell your investors, you're like, yeah, I'm buying this company, it's down 90% on this premise that AI is the future?
Exactly.
Like, are we going to look back at the end of the year and have a pod and go, wow, look at these idiots with their 13Fs. They didn't buy Dom H, which is a $300 stock now because they own Anduril,
Yeah.
or whatever it might be. Now, I do just want to ask you, kind of from myself, and I think from the audience perspective as well, when you're looking at a 13F, number one, where are you looking at them? Where are you finding them? Number two, what firms do you like the most? Because you and I have this conversation a lot, and I know you have a couple that you love to look at, like guys that you like to follow. Who are you looking to follow? And when you're going through a 13F, what specifically are you looking for? Are you looking for, new themes popping up in there? Are you looking for initiations in positions? Are you looking for additions to existing positions? What's kind of your thought process there?
Yeah. So I usually use Whale Wisdom. I mean, it's a free public resource. I think that's the best one to mention. Obviously, there's other paid ones that I have access to, but there's no point. Everyone should use Whale Wisdom when it comes to looking at and tracking 13Fs. You can set alerts for free. It's easy. You'll get an email as soon as it's posted. In terms of firms and funds that I look at, Opelousas is obviously one. I look at Drux, so Duquesne. And then I have some other ones that I follow that I'm just going to keep private, to be honest with you. Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. Yeah, there's just some... Oh, God. You put me on the spot. Yeah, I mean, Tiger Global is obviously one that I look at just to see from a momentum standpoint where they're investing their dollars. Everyone loves to see where Buffett's putting his money. Obviously, I'm going to look at that. But for me, in finding a lot of success the past 5 to 6 years, I found tremendous value in finding firms and funds that operate anywhere from the $2 to $7 to $8 billion AUM range and really focusing on their performance. And the cool thing about Whale Wisdom is that they give you a whale score. And so they score the portfolios and the managers based off their performance relative to each other, but also to the S&P. So obviously, like, the higher the score, the better that they're doing versus their peers, which means that they're doing something that you should probably look into. So there are some firms and funds that I have found through those tools, but also through word of mouth from other people saying, hey, like, you really need to check out what this small family office is doing. And that's like probably the one piece of advice I'd give, which is there's two real ways to make tremendous money in the market. One is you own equity. You're actually in the company and you're on the board or you're a director. And then when it goes to IPO or it gets bought out privately, right, you're going to cash and liquidate your shares and you're going to make millions of dollars. That's actually one way to do it through the market. The other way is inside information. Now, inside information is illegal. Everyone knows that. It still happens on a daily basis. Like this Dom H trade that's going off right now, and now it's almost at $10. There are people that knew about that trade happening, right? There are people that knew that the Trumps were going to come onto the board. They knew about the special dividend. It just happens. And that's why we have, federal regulatory agencies like the SEC to do their due diligence and make sure that it's not corrupt and it's not overdone and oversaturated and people are just completely abusing the system. Having said that, there are metrics and there are things that you can look at that are free and that are legal that give you a hint as to if there is inside information or a competitive edge being shared in portfolios. Like, you see moves happen and you see some portfolios and some managers who do tremendous things with the small amount of money that they have. And it comes down to just having access to networks. And you're right, it may not exactly be inside information. It could just be really well networked and really well connected to know when someone's having a good quarter or when someone's destined to, break all-time high with their revenue. Like, there are things that you can access for free from a due diligence research perspective, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's through investor relation boards. LinkedIn is one place where a lot of people don't go, but you can see what jobs are opening. You can see what that means for their current market position. On LinkedIn, they also say their employee hiring rate is. So like how drastically, what percent of increase are they hiring, which is generally a bullish sign for companies, but also who are they hiring? Are they hiring a head of sales? Well, why did the previous head of sales leave? You can start asking these questions, and that's where you can message people at the company and say, hey, like, I'm looking to apply to the company. I noticed the head of sales left. Do you have any idea why? Or would you be open to talking about, why they left? Because I'm curious about joining the company. We're a pretty far long tangent away from 13Fs, but I think it's really important to understand that the 13Fs that I follow privately have been the source of due diligence like that, which is I trust the way in which they do their research, their business. They have a really good whale score, so they're constantly beating the S&P. But I also cater it to my portfolio, which is much more value-based. If I'm looking for really large stretches of high volatility, I'll peek more into like the Tiger Globals or the ones that historically have either done really, really well or really, really poor. But I would, from a base level, if you're not following Appaloosa, Tiger Global, Duquesne, obviously Berkshire Hathaway, like these big names, those are going to move the market significantly. Anytime one of them enters a position in a company, it's going to get guaranteed sentiment and volume out the gate. One of the things I like about following smaller firms that have a really good representation in the market and good performance is that you don't see those spikes, which means you have time to get in and you have time to try and follow suit and follow trade.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point about LinkedIn and kind of that extra level of due diligence. And I think it's a perfect example to talk about this Dom H once more. So last night, or really yesterday afternoon, when I had first heard about it, the first thing I did, and this is something that I do that I don't think you mentioned, but I'm sure you do as well, is check the board of directors. Checking the board of directors for any firm, it's going to give you two good insights. Number one, it's going to tell you whether or not anybody has any idea what they're doing. And how you do that is you just look up who's on their board, go to their LinkedIn, look at their resume, look at where they've worked, to look at what they've done. And that's the first thing. I remember when we were looking at Chegg a few months ago, the thesis was great and it ended up playing out. But after looking at their board, we both realized like, oh no, there's no way they're going to turn this around. Like this board sucks. Like the people that work here have no good experience of turnaround in the past. Most of them came from industries that are not related at all. And it just kind of killed the thesis. But for something like Dom H, yesterday I look into it and I see, who is it? Ron Lieberman sits on their board. Ron Lieberman's the EVP of Trump International. And I tweeted about it yesterday afternoon. I'm like, this is the exact proximity to power that you want when you have a new administration. Somebody like him who's the EVP, he's not directly affiliated, but it means that people who are directly affiliated may come down the road. And now we're seeing that. We're seeing two Trumps join the board of Dom H the very next day. So yeah, when you're talking about due diligence, looking at the board of directors, looking at who's associated with the firm, what their history is in business, where they've been previously, that to me is one of the most important things I can do when I'm looking into stocks I want to buy or companies, or, I mean, in your case, some of these 13Fs. Who are these managers? Why is their performance so good? Where are they coming from? And what access to information might they have? Because like you said, there's only two ways to make money. And I think we see the latter a lot more than people want to admit.
Yeah, definitely. And anytime you're making money in the market, a technical or fundamental trade, or you're just holding over time, right? Like there's obviously other ways to make money, but when you think about the people that escape with, the 7 to 8 plus figure trades on a consistent basis, or exits and entries that just feel a little too good to be true, it's because they usually are, right? They've refined and mastered the way they go about collecting that information and due diligence to where it's all technically legal. It's just in a certain manner that they do it. And as I'm speaking, Dom H is now at 70% pre-market. So it's at 1050.
Yeah, I'm watching it live. I got the...
Yeah, I'm sure you do. This thing's ripping. it's good you brought up Chegg, because I remember when we did that little session and we went over Chegg, because it was like, should we take a risk position and speculative, just see how far it can go out of this bottom with the integration of AI, because AI could help it a lot. AI could also kill it. And we pulled up that board and you and I were both like, this is insanely bearish.
Yeah.
And so that's something that was a great point to bring up. Always look at the board, look at who's leading the company. Do they have experience being successful, and like, why are they there? And like, do you really believe in them to turn around a corporation or a company or a firm or fund, whatever it is? Like, are they the right people to invest in, right? You invest in people a lot of the time, and then the money will follow suit. One last thing I wanted to chat about today was our article last week. Excellent.
I beg your pardon.
I beg your pardon. And really just grocery outlets, as well as niche food sectors, because we were talking about Walmart and the run that it's been on recently. It seems like people are now flocking to Walmart for groceries, given the price spikes that we're seeing. I mean, every time I go to the grocery store, I get 4 to 5 things and it's $40 to $50, like mayonnaise and ketchup and chicken and Chex and bananas. Like it's stuff that's like very bland and normal. Yeah. So Chex.
Who are you?
Dude, I love Chex. I'm a big Chex guy. So
no free brand deals.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what are your thoughts? Are you looking at Costco now? Because my mom doesn't go to Costco, but yesterday she's like, maybe I'll start going to Costco, which to me means she's never been like that. She's gone to like Harris Teeter, which is a Kroger brand down in the South that we just always go to. But the moment people start asking and double clicking on this question, like, should I look for a different source for my food because of how expensive things are becoming? That's where a Walmart and a Costco and a Sam's Club and a BJ's, like, they can all benefit greatly, especially if these food prices continue to increase, and specifically around eggs. Eggs are so expensive right now. Chicken's getting increasingly expensive. That has to be a theme that we continue to track over the next couple of weeks and maybe months.
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm a perma Costco bull. I love Costco. Every time I go, incredible atmosphere, great selection, super high quality, and at a value price, right? It's a Sam's Club or a BJ's, just with a slightly refined palate. You're not getting the cheapest bulk, you're getting high quality bulk for a better than average price if you were to go to like a Wegmans. Because for me, I mean, I'm in upstate New York, so my options, we don't have Kroger. We obviously have BJ's. I don't think we have a Sam's Club, but what we do have is Wegmans. So for me, it's either Wegmans or Costco. Those are like my two choices. Wegmans, for anybody who's listening who knows what Wegmans is very expensive. It's definitely one of the more boutique grocers. It's not quite like an Erewhon, but it's pretty damn close. So for me, the move to Costco was really simple. And I think people at different scales are making the same move to their equivalents of a Costco. Whether it be, usually they shop at a Kroger and now they're shopping at a BJ's. They're making kind of a lateral jump, but not a super high quality like a Wegmans over to a Costco. They're making like a Tops to a Sam's Club or BJ's. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And I guess that brings up a good point about our original thesis about people switching to higher quality foods is like, we're seeing their stock equivalents go up. We're seeing Vital Farms do really well. We're seeing Sprouts Farmers Market do really well. But that could just be industry wide. Like, it could just be the cost of goods is going up. So all these names are running. I mean, I was really surprised to see Walmart just ripping all time highs. Like, not even like flowing all time highs, like ripping all time highs. Like, hasn't touched moving averages, has just been on a straight heater. So maybe it's just industry wide cost of goods going up, but I see that trend continuing.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, Costco is doing the exact same move. If you run a parallel chart comparison between Costco and Walmart, it's the same type of move. I mean, blasting all-time highs, not even checking back on moving averages. There must be a ton of speculation right now about the profits that they're pulling in Q1 because of the food shortage and because of these increasing prices, that they're going to blow earnings out of the water in Q2. And this is the run up to prepare for that.
Yeah, I wonder if my mom is still in. This is one of my better buys, Costco, out of that huge monthly flag a couple of years ago. And I mean, it made a pretty respectable double since then. And people are so worried too about the value of it. Like, it's a grocery store. How is it trading at a 30, not, I think it's like a 35 price to earnings, but it's like, no, it's a culture.
Oh,
And
God.
by culture, I mean, it's a cult. But yeah, check out the article from last week. We talk all about niche grocers and more specifically eggs. Eggs have been such a hotly discussed topic recently with prices going up, but also with people getting more interested in pasture raised. We talk a lot about Vital Farms and other related products. So it's an interesting conversation, and definitely recommend checking out that article. Some good information in there, as well as a few companies that we're watching based on this move. So check it out.
You want to talk about good marketing. Kerrygold came into the market and smoked everyone. Their company has blown up the past 2-3 years since they came to market, especially against Land O'Lakes. And for those that don't know, Land O'Lakes is owned by Cal-Maine. And that's what we reviewed in the article last week. And we've also discussed that before. So definitely take a look at it. It's live. It's on sebsresearch.com. It's linked on the Twitter. It's also on the Substack. So make sure you check it out. And we're going to be posting those again weekly, ongoing topics and discussions about themes and events that give you actionable insight into where you can position your trades, but also your investments long-term and just generally where the market's moving. Besides that, you have anything else?
Dom H, $11.30.
Oh my gosh. So it's almost a double.
Yeah, I'm up a double. Yeah. And I didn't even get a great entry yesterday. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was towards the end of the day. Yeah. This thing's going to fly all day. All right, guys. We will talk to you soon.
Now watch this drive.